Ladies and gentlemen of Paratopia, welcome to yet another edition of this fine show called Paratopia Oculus.
That's right, Oculus.
Jeff Ritzman.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
I'm great.
Anything new going on in your life that we need to know about?
No, I can't say that there is. It's very pleasantly quiet. Although the door has been 3 times now, someone has rang the doorbell and no one's there.
So no one's rang the doorbell, is what you're saying?
That's correct.
Huh. I had a day a couple of days ago of just like weird coincidences, but not, I wouldn't even call them synchronicities. They were the kind of things like where you're watching a movie and like, you know, you cough and then the person on the screen coughs at the exact same time, or you bite into something, and there's an explosion. And it's like, but it would happen all day. And it seemed to be like the first thing that happened was, I went grocery shopping with my roommate, one of my roommates, and I heard her call my name. And so I turned around, as I was leaving the pasta aisle, and she was just turning the corner into the aisle. And it was clear from her body language that she did not call me. She was just like looking at pasta, but I went over and asked her anyway. And sure enough, she hadn't called me.
Huh.
So I thought that was weird because we were shopping together. We were like separate. So it would make sense that she would call me and be like, okay, I'm done. We can go now or whatever.
Right.
But that had not happened. So that was weird. I don't know. It was just weird. And then at night, like my head started to try to rotate a couple of times, like that meditation energy clearly wanted to do something. So I let it go before going to bed. And, you know, once again, it does movements, many of which I recognize, but a lot which I did not. So I don't know what that's about or if they're all connected or what. But I just thought it was strange because I can't really remember a time where I had a bunch of just coincidences that didn't feel like patterned on anything, but were noticeable, right. You know, like completely meaningless. And the only meaning I can derive from it is that maybe it's because I've been thinking about coincidence lately and talking about how, well, gee, if coincidence exists in every aspect of every facet of life, then coincidence by definition doesn't exist at all.
Yeah.
So probably thinking about that led to, Oh, you're on that now? Well, here, let me show you this.
Yeah. It makes sense.
Yeah, now you're going to have a day of this.
Yeah. I think my only anomaly is that there is so much Star Wars stuff out on the shelves right now. And I've bought 4 things, and that's it. That's an anomaly for me.
But they were hundreds of dollars worth of things, probably.
Well, that's true, but, you know, a $200 lightsaber, $150 droid.
A life-size AT-AT.
Not yet. But yeah, there's a lot of that out there. And so being the fanatic that I am, it's very hard to keep oneself under control. But I'm doing very well, actually. So
Good man.
Yeah.
You don't need to hoard. You're not a hoarder.
Oh, no. I just love to be surrounded by the things I love. Wait, what? Yeah. So it's good. It's I think that the impulse of the instant gratification is wearing off when it comes to that. So yeah, I think that's good. But there's so much cool stuff. You have no idea.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting too because this Star Wars resurgency, which inevitably the commercialism comes with it, because that's kind of what it is coming at a time when essentially we're being told to buy nothing nowadays. It's like you've got stores that don't sell anything anymore, as far as I can tell. These department stores that are full of nothing. And you've got, you know, like Mac Computers who are like, well, we don't even want to sell you memory drives anymore. We just kind of want everything to be on a cloud. Right. And you don't need CDs. You can just buy it from the iTunes store, which is like owning nothing. So it's weird, aren't we at a weird point as a consumer culture where it's like, well, what you're going to consume today is nothing and you're going to pay for it.
Yes. Yeah, you're buying air.
Yeah, and now out comes, at least for as far as our childhoods are concerned, the most in your face stuff filled consumerism of all, Star Wars.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You've got to have this.
Yeah, well, when they show you a 4-foot high TIE fighter, then that becomes very hard to say no to.
But do you think it will backfire? Do you think that we're retraining ourselves to want to pay into not owning things?
I don't know about that. I mean, as far as the Star Wars stuff goes, diehard collectors are always going to want to be completists, and I know because I used to be one of those people. And
do kids play with action figures?
Oh yeah,
I did see a little girl dressed up as Princess Leia at Costco today.
Oh, there you go.
So that was adorable.
But yeah, it's people who want to be completists are going to buy the stuff, and people who aren't, aren't. And for me, it's like as far as consumerism now, it's like back in the early 80s, we all got rid of our phonographs and we started buying those little Discman CD players because we couldn't afford the big rack system CD players. And then when we could afford those, we bought those, and we bought Blu-ray players and DVD players and all of that. And now it's like everything comes to your TV with Netflix, and you can buy things on Netflix, but you don't actually download them to anything. You just can access them on the cloud. And now they expect me to go back and buy vinyl again. Well, I'm sorry, but no, I'm not taking part in buying another turntable in my lifetime. And a lot of these artists these days are recognizing the trend that I think the younger generation from us is starting to want vinyl. And you know why? Let me explain to you why you want vinyl. Because you actually get something. Because it's a big tangible thing with gatefold covers and liner notes that you can actually read. You don't need a microscope to do it. That's really what it boils down to. And not because I'm an immense fan, but David Gilmour just released a solo album which is called Rattle That Lock. It's amazing, and he released it as like a box set thing, and it contained like the liner notes in a book and a DVD and a CD and all these tangible things. And by the way, a copy of a book that I can't remember the name of. But there's a copy of a book in the CD. So it's like, people want to get something for what they're paying out for. And I think that's the whole big resurgence with vinyl, because it certainly doesn't sound better than direct dubs, which is what CDs are for the most part. It's, they want something tangible, and I can't blame them, because I do too.
Well, it's funny, also at Costco, they have this box set of Star Wars books, and the advertisement for this box set is, "Be a rebel, read."
Right.
Wow, that's what our culture's come to.
Yeah.
You've got to trick kids into thinking it's cool to read.
Right. Well, yeah. Yeah. I mean, our culture is sadly devolved into a very dark place, in my opinion. So, and I'll be talking about that this weekend on Project Archivist with Rojan and Lobo.
Ah, well, that'll have been like several weeks ago by the time this...
That's correct. But if you haven't, I'm sure it's in the archives. Go check it out at projectarchivist.com. I think it's .com, right?
Sure.
So there we go.
If not, then not.
Right. Just Google it for
some
God's
Chinese
sake.
Company gets your business. Not unlike if you go to paratopia.com and you end up in China.
Right.
So, okay, watch me tie this into our opener jumping off point of...
I'm watching.
The archetypal image and the paranormal / ufology. We talk about the possibility that these phenomena have evolved from, gods to occulty things to fairy folklore to the modern alien. And then the question always arises in my mind, well, if that's true, then why do people still see fairies? Why do people still see these things that should have gone extinct with the new with cultural shift? But the tie-in here is the TIE fighter. Now, you've said that at one point you saw, or not you saw, but you had investigated. You had a case of somebody who had seen a Mack truck in the sky, and you had another one who saw the upside down Star Trek vehicle, the Enterprise, in the sky. Right. So that might be an example of that sort of like cultural overlay, but those are pretty extreme examples. I haven't heard a lot of that. And you would think that with Star Wars being as huge as it is, people would have seen TIE fighters by now or something. And so I wonder, do you ever wonder why it is that the flying saucer, I know that it was a truncated media hype version of what Kenneth Arnold said the movement of what he saw was.
Right.
But why did that stick if it's not really there? And we have so many other examples of what we believe to be futuristic or alien technology that are always not that, or almost always not a flying saucer. Jagged edges, you've got the Close Encounters vehicle that kind of looks like almost stalactites in the sky or something. What do you think it is about that slick, nondescript saucer shape that has stuck if it's not real?
Well, one thing I'm ashamed to say that I've never done is to look backwards into culture media to see if there has ever been a flying disc represented in comic or in sci-fi illustration, or even some other kind of media, some other kind of something that would kind of touch that off, because I think I mentioned on the last show or the one before that I'm finding a lot of interesting things about what Jeff Kripal brings to the table when he talks about the creative influence over reality, which is ostensibly what he talks about when he says, that a comic book guy writes a story, and then suddenly the comic book guy kind of tends to, they kind of, Grant Morrison wrote The Invisibles, and it just so happens that he wrote the main character as a bald, rather handsome, dashing young Briton, and that's what he is. And in the storyline, and Morrison will say this if you watch any number of his lectures out there. He'll talk about, my character wound up with a lung infection and was near death, and within a week after writing it, I was in the hospital with a lung infection near death. And other things. He said at the moment of writing this stuff, and realizing that it was having an effect on his life, he basically said, well, I'm gonna be more careful with this character, number one, but he said, I'm gonna write myself a hot girlfriend. And he said within a matter of weeks, he had that hot girlfriend, and she looked just like the girl in the comic. And so this all plays really nicely into Jeff Kripal's hands, because this is the kind of thing that he talks about when he says, that the paranormal is a story waking up to its author. And so I would be curious in turn, and this is something that I've never looked at. I'm sure people like Greg Bishop may have looked into this. Was there a representation of the flying saucer in cultural media before Kenneth Arnold's sighting? I'm just curious. I don't know if there was or not. If there was, then, one could argue that was already somewhat firmly entrenched in the psyche of the collective. But if not, you can also look at it from the McKenna route, which is to say that the disc throughout history has been a symbol of oneness, of personal wholeness. And so maybe the idea of these things being shaped like discs or circles, or even in today's, some of today's sightings and earlier into the 80s and early 70s, the spheres certainly took on that same kind of appearance, a disc on its edge. You look at the Egyptian sun discs and just keep going back from there. It's quite a representation of this kind of thing. So I don't know. Is that where it comes from? I have no idea. But, if we're going to make the connection between fairies and aliens, then certainly you can make that connection pretty easily.
Well, it just seems odd that, in the 1800s, you have these airship sightings, and those are like dirigibles, right? This is kind of what people are seeing.
Right.
So in a way, they're sort of cigar-shaped craft, you could say, on the one hand, but on the other, they're identifiable in terms of something that we've subsequently flown. But
not then. I mean, that's
right.
That's the critical point. And not then, there was nothing that was supposed to be in the air. Does it work both ways, I guess, is the question. You could say that people were influenced to think of these dirigibles after seeing those kind of, we've all seen the drawings from back then that were done of these things. And was that influential? I mean, who knows?
But then the other thing is like an X-Wing fighter, a TIE fighter. These have wings. These are basically airplanes. So maybe that's it too. It's not, when we think about futuristic, maybe we do think of something, I don't know, that doesn't have wings, something that is beyond what it even looks like a machine would look like. I mean, it's a pretty nondescript thing, a flying saucer.
Yeah.
Although the thing that I saw was really descript. Actually, when you think about like a fluorescent green oval with windows running down the center, that almost could be a dirigible or something, right? Like that could be an airship of the 1800s. I don't know. I don't know what that is, but I guess then the other sort of question about this stuff I have is if we're saying that there is a face of this that is changing through time, then why do we sometimes experience, well, not only just experience like fairies, or in my case, some sort of, I don't know, possessive entity that was demon or gargoyle-like, who then you go and look through Buddhist literature and, oh, there's Garuda. That's what it was, or something similar to that. So why do we have these certain images that don't change, or behaviors such as ghostly behavior that doesn't change throughout time? I wonder if this is a kink in the theory, or if it has been explained somewhere along the way. Do you know?
I don't know. I think that the one thing that we can't expect is for the phenomena to reflect any kind of perfection when it comes to that, because it's certainly an imperfect phenomena if you look hard enough at it. And so is it beyond the scope of this to say, yeah, sometimes it glitches, and sometimes we get flashes of previous notions. I don't think that can be ruled out. It certainly can't be proven by any stretch. None of it can, but why would we expect it not to show odd things at certain times? If it operates in such a way that it's influenced by culture, or it influences culture, or it's created by the collective, then we still, I think, as a culture, we still live very much in a historical. With historical interest in mind. And so when we're talking about airships, and we're talking about, how many times a day do you think the Hindenburg gets talked about? How many times a day do you think that the Titanic is discussed and dissected? There's still a lot of energy being put into those subjects. And so can we expect this thing to kind of glitch every now and then? Why do we expect it to be this absolutely consistent phenomena when it's shown itself to be time and again the most inconsistent thing around? I guess is the best way to put it.
Well, even with glitches, it must have some boundaries, because I don't see people getting abducted by Elvis.
Right, right. Yeah. There's got to be some kind of a fence post that says, none shall pass through here. But I don't know. Certainly I've talked to a fair number of people who, have described everything from giant rabbits to what can only be referred to as werewolves, although they didn't say that word. The description of it was certainly a werewolf, and all these things connected to, a UFO of some kind or another, whether it be a light in a field or a hard object on the ground or something like that. I would say out of, I can't even tell you how many people I've interviewed or talked with about this stuff, but I'd say, more than a fair share of people, it would definitely be a double-digit percentage don't report aliens, don't report that sort of thing. They report ghost people, bunnies, monsters. I mean, I think this bears mentioning here. I'm one of these people who believes that the whole notion of the species, you've heard about 50 different species visiting the earth and all that. It's all the same thing to me. I don't see any differentiating between the gray to the lizard people to, the blondes, the Nordics, whatever. To me, it's all the same thing presenting in a different mass. So that's who you're listening to. But all that said, there's a lot more. If you want to talk species, there's a lot more species than 50. Because the ones that I've come across fairly frequently don't fit into any category that you would want to talk about openly. At least not in this field.
Well, when you see a bulbous-headed thing because you've put a crystal to your forehead or whatever,
right,
and you see some sort of being coming and going through a fractal, and you've got a tall shrouded guy. I mean, at the time, does this not look and feel as though these are different entities coming and going through different means?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and I have to ask myself, when you're laying there and you're completely unconscious. I mean, I was completely out, and I woke up and the thing is standing right there beside the bed, and it's clear, that it's a very large round head. Well, that was kind of atypical to what I had previously caught a glimpse of as the alien. That was not the typical thing that I had ever seen. I'd never seen a thing with a head this big. I mean, just huge. And I might point out that, for what I could make out of its frame, of its overall frame, at least the shoulders and neck and chest and upper arms, was not capable of supporting something so large. I mean, it didn't make logistical sense looking at it. Now that I can look back on it with some clarity.
Different gravity where he comes from, gentlemen.
Right. There's that. Yeah.
Well, did it look like the?
It was like nothing I had expected to.
Well, did it look
see,
like the Crowley creature?
Yes.
Huh.
Yes. If I had to pick something that it looked closest to, it would be that.
What was that called? Liam or something?
Lamb.
Yeah, Aleister Crowley's lamb. Huh. Interesting. And then another thing I just sort of wonder, I don't know that there's an answer to this, but it speaks to my confusion as to why skeptics aren't latching onto the trickster theory more, because it seems like this is a really good question, is why do some hotspots, UFO waves, even places like Metagorgy or like the Fatima visions and these things, why is it that some of them become huge phenomena that people pay attention to en masse, and then skeptics have to come out and say, well, no, see, this is nonsense because blah, blah, blah. But there's obviously enough evidence that it is real to attract a lot of attention, as opposed to the crazy guy claiming to be Jesus.
Right.
And the same thing for UFO stuff. There's a difference between Billy Myers nonsense and the Gulf Breeze sightings, for instance.
Right. Although a lot of people would call that questionable too, but that's beside the point. I get what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't call it questionable in the sense that, like, the whole town claimed to have seen stuff at Gulf Breeze, and so it warrants investigation. Right. So I just wonder, but always there's enough of a question where skeptics can be trotted out and say, no, this isn't real, go back to sleep, folks.
Right.
So what is that? What is the thing that differentiates the crazy person that we don't pay attention to en masse, and the thing that we go, well, this could be something?
I mean, do you think that, well, I'll put it to you this way. When we look at psych evaluations and we hear, hearing voices in the head is symptom 1 of schizophrenia, right? So when we hear things like that, that's a constant. That's something that we see in all people afflicted with schizophrenia. And I know that there are people out there who are actively contesting, saying, do we really know what schizophrenia is? Do we know that these people are not perceiving things in just a different way than the rest of us? Are they truly mentally ill, quote unquote, mentally ill. I'm not sure how to really answer. I'm not a mental health professional. I don't know how that all works, whether chemical imbalances or.
I can answer that.
Go ahead.
Funny you should bring up schizophrenia. Just this morning, I was talking to Tyler Copejohn outside of my work, at my coffee bar work, and a schizophrenic woman. Now, she checked both ways before she crossed the street. She walked across the street. She walked up to me, and she asked me if I have a lighter, which I don't. And then she proceeds to sit down next to me and starts a conversation with herself, which ends up yelling to herself as if she's yelling at someone else. And what she's yelling is, it was something along the lines of, I want to buy St. Louis, but I don't like your New York accent.
Huh.
So that's crazy. Like, it's not like she's just hearing coherent voices or even a coherent persecution. It's like nutty conversation.
Right.
So yeah, I think there is mental illness there.
Sure.
That is not like, oh, she's a shaman.
Right. But then again, you have the little girl that I told you about, a long time ago now. I think they featured her on Oprah. At least they taped it for me because of the weirdness factor of it was that this little girl meets with these beings that take the shape of animals and aliens and demons and angels and all matter of creatures of one kind or another. She actually departs our consensus reality and only interacts with that reality. Now, she is schizophrenically diagnosed, but it was interesting to Lisa in that the land that she says she goes to or claims that she goes to in these exits from reality was called Kundalini. And so I found that to be interesting. I found it interesting to watch her on the program and how lucid that she was having these discussions with these creatures that no one else can see. And yet she's diagnosed with this. So what is that? Really, what is that? Is that simply mental illness, or is there something more going on there that we just don't understand?
Yeah, it could be that there are certain things that get lumped in with mental illness.
Right.
Because we don't have another definition for them in the West, and that's unfortunate.
Right. And that's not to, by any means to ignore that there is serious mental illness out there. There definitely is.
Well, there's another thing too. Maybe you've seen the thing. It was like I don't know if it was a meme or not, but it was a photo that was kind of like a photo negative, but not as obvious, of a baby. And so, like, I couldn't make out what it was, but it says if you can make out what this picture is, then odds are you are psychotic, because psychotics are more likely and normal people are not. And then they show what the photo is. And even going back, I couldn't still make out the figure of it. And I was like, wow, a psychotic is actually seeing what is there that I can't see.
Right.
So there's something about being a psychotic where you're actually seeing what really is there.
Perception is dramatically different, Yeah, I mean, there's all of that. So, like I said, I don't know about the autonomous nature of this stuff and how it manifests itself of one kind or another. I don't know. I don't know how much consistency that we can put on that, because when you wake up in the middle of the night, you don't expect to see a being that looked like what it looked like. And it wasn't even in your... Like, there is a mind's eye when I picture the alien. There is a definitive picture that I see, and it's largely grouped from my experiences back in the late 80s, early 90s. That's what I see. And there's one particular event that I had where I looked as close as I could into the face of one as I possibly could muster. And that's what I take from that. I know it's only a partial fragmented memory, but that's the way I see it. This was decidedly not anything like that. And so what does that mean? Does that mean that there is an autonomous entity that this is part of what they actually appear like to us? Is this its true form? Or is this something that's made from the collective that has unhinged itself from the collective egos of the planet? And that's what this is. And so it can appear as anything that it wants to appear because it's its own thing. In other words, when it's not here, it's somewhere else, possibly with someone else. There may not be a need for rest per se as we know it. It may not eat food. These are all things that, get extremely deep, extremely quick. But one of the questions I always have to ask myself is when these beings or when these craft are not here, there must be a massive hangar somewhere where all this crap is, right? No, they go somewhere else. And I don't think that's anywhere that we can spot them. So take that for what it's worth.
Well, there doesn't seem to be any sort of pull on its part or push toward us to ritualize them in the way that, the demigods and gods and spirits and sprites and that sort of thing come through during ritual or magical practice or religious ceremony, these sorts of things. Or in the case of Buddhists, meditation and group activity type things that are akin to religion.
Right.
And then they have these sort of possessive dances that happen. So if it's, I just wonder, if it's like one intelligence or one thing that needs to present itself as multiple things, well, it seems like a lot of those multiplicities are embedded. They're embedded in, just what I'm saying, our ceremonies and our magic and all of that sort of thing. They're embedded there. But this alien outcropping of it isn't pushing for that. It's not like the plant that's whispering the secrets of ayahuasca. Right. Here's how you contact us. Right. It's not doing that. So I wonder why that is. And I got a great thought for that. And the thought is that it's already injected itself into something probably more powerful than religion or ritual or spirituality. And that is common culture. I would defy anybody to go to any boardwalk in the United States and not see the effigy of the alien somewhere on a sticker, on a bumper sticker, on a T-shirt or whatever. This thing has permeated popular culture. It is everywhere. Everybody at this point knows the typical scenario of the alien abduction. Everyone has known for decades what a flying saucer is. This thing has injected itself into art, into music, and it's permeated everything. And in many ways, I honestly do believe that culture itself is a lot more powerful a tool. I think only probably in the 80s did I hear the notion that music itself is a powerful thing. Like, we can change the world with music. And I think, things like, Live Aid and all that, and Farm Aid, all of these things, they turn tides of huge financial contributions. They turn the tide of helping people in need and all of that. And people would say, well, Africa is still a mess. Yeah, but how big a mess would it be if Live Aid had never happened? Music is an incredibly powerful thing. And so if you are some kind of other trying to, have some kind of intercourse with another society or another culture, then I think probably the best way to do it is to inject yourself somehow subliminally into their culture so that you permeate that place. I can't get away from this feeling or this notion that for every eye that lays upon the image of the alien, that somehow that no matter what kind of reaction the person may have to it, whether it be amusement or fear or whatever, I can't help thinking that just that logo in your face
time and time again throughout the course of your life does something to enable the phenomena. Every little person, every little bit that attention that gets, or every discussion that they have. In other words, they've made jet fuel out of this show. It adds more to the phenomena being able to impart itself to people physically or not physically, but in experiential situations, which sometimes are physical. So I don't know. I can't escape that notion of that suspicion.
So do you think then when at the time that we sort of went after Jacobs and did away with hypnosis for any thinking person,
right?
There was sort of another movement afoot, I think, around then, sort of a reinvigoration of George Hansen and Jacques Vallée and the just non-nuts and bolts. I mean, do you think that the phenomena, when it presents to you as a guy in a shroud and several other people as a guy or a gal in a shroud and comes and has sit-down chats instead of abductions, do you think that's in response to essentially taking away the pop culture ritual of hypnosis and that storyline?
Yeah, and I think it's partially, that that the novelty wears off, if that makes any sense. That I'm not saying that I ever became used to that facade being presented as real, but I would assume that for people who have more experience than I do, and yes, there are people out there with more than me, I think it can get to be old hat of sorts, and this thing likes to keep you on edge. I mean, you remember that the you mentioned the fractal thing earlier. I mean, that whole experience shot out of talking about the psychedelics. We were knee deep in talking about what is the connection between psychedelic compounds and the alien and the UFO. Why do these people in the Amazon who have never been exposed to popular culture of the West, why are they painting flying saucers and clearly painting aliens? And so we are wrestling with this. And of course, that's the night where I go to bed and for no other reason, wake up in the middle of the night to see fractals over my eyes and all that going forward. It's almost like a response to that.
Well, do you think it is a response? Do you think that in some way the universe or reality or something in it is going, oh, you're interested in this? Well, let me show you what that is.
Right.
Do you feel that's happening with you? I mean, that was definitely in the mushroom trip. That was literally blatantly for me what some mushroom entity Carney Barker was doing, was going, you look at this. But I feel like that's also what reality is doing. And I think it's like amplified on this island maybe too, but certainly I can't get away from that notion. But I don't know if it's showing me, if what I'm being shown is actualities, like, oh, you're interested in this subject? Well, here's the truth of it. And so now you can differentiate between the garbage and the truth, or if it's just going, oh, okay, well, I'll just show you this then, and nothing's real or garbage. It's all just Play-Doh.
Right. Well, I mean, here's the question that I have to ask about that, and I agree with you. It seems to respond to what your interest is, but my question is it the other way around? Is your interest actually fueling what you experience on your end? In other words, are you the one tuning in to the more that it has to offer? I
don't know. I mean, in terms of like the spiritual thing, right? I mean, it unfolded like, okay, here's Claire Audio. A couple of months of that. That's done. Now here's remote viewing. Okay, we're done with that. Now here, it was like this unfolding of thing. I had no idea. Krishnamurti never said, here's what happens next. So I had nothing in mind. I had no idea this was ever going to happen. Right. So it did feel like, okay, here's this. Now you can stick with one of these and become that guy, or you can keep seeing more. Now, I don't know that that's what's happening, but that's what it feels like. Yeah. So is anything real? I mean, what do you get the sense of? Do you get the sense that you're being shown things that are true, or do you get the sense that you're being shown that there is no such thing as truth?
somewhere between, but towards the latter. I get the sense that that the only thing that I can get from it or make sense of it is that don't believe any of this crap. You have to exist in this, but this by no means is the beginning or end of anything. And I think that's been a kind of a huge thing to be reminded of every so often.
Do you think that you've ever been shown useless information? I mean,
absolutely.
You do. Like what? What?
The 7 rule the 9? Really? Really? What does that mean? What does that mean? That's completely nonsensical horse crap. I mean, there's just nothing about that to me that says anything useful. And of course, I say that now, and we in a month we'll see some kind of news story. The 7 do rule the 9. Well,
the thing about that is there are several, probably several dozen explanations that you've seen of that people have brought to you and said, "Oh, it means this for angels. Oh, it means this in occult. Oh, it means this
right.
in Star Trek or whatever." It's like
right.
So right. It like has so many meanings that it almost forces you to ponder, what does this mean? Yeah. But like when someone came to you as if in a plague doctor outfit,
right?
I mean, that's got to have a meaning, right? Like that's not just like, I just put on a random costume and came to yell at Jeff today. It's like, no, there's something meaning behind that, if you care to look. But do you think that do you think that is always the way, or do you really think 7 rule the 9 is just complete nonsense to do what? I mean, if it's nonsense, what do you think it's there for?
Well, I think that I think when you dissect that entire event, and we'll probably talk about some of these things in the next hour. I mean, I think you always have to question when you're in the midst of the experience, can you get yourself together enough to throw down the breadcrumbs to say, what was going on while I was seeing this? I get the sense that this is more tricksterish than we dare to imagine it to be. In other words, I used to look at the UFO as the shiny object. Keep your eye on the shiny object, Jeff. Just keep looking at that shiny star, and meanwhile, we're coming up behind you, or something to that effect. In other words, there's more going on that you're not paying attention to, but you're being diffused with this cryptic crap that makes you go, what does that mean? What is he talking about? Who is that person? Why is he in my living room? There's something else going on while all that's going on. The reported phenomena isn't the phenomena. What's being reported is the facade of it all. I don't buy the facade. I think there's something more going on. My question is, what is going on?
Well, this is okay. So let's isolate this issue, because when we talk about the facade, we generally talk about the physicality. I agree with you. The Nordics, all that stuff. There are not multiple species. It's nonsense. But is everything nonsense? Is it all facade, including the interaction, including like, okay, for you personally,
right?
Back when you suspected that it was demonic, was the behavior of this objectively demonic, or were you just afraid of it? And at the point when you like crushed one and smushed its head in,
right,
were you thinking that these were physical beings in the room and that you could do that, and therefore you could do that? I mean, is it that literal to, oh, you think this is what this is? Well, let me show it to you.
No. In fact, I didn't even know if I could get hands on anything. And that was an experience that was beyond the weird. And I think I've said before that crushing the face of this thing was like like phyllo dough. It was like baklava. It was like crushing that really thin crust on baklava. It just disintegrated into so much paper. In other words, did they behave like demonic after I knew that it was demonic? It seemed a lot more threatening. There was a palpable sense whenever it was around. And this is back in the day where you could walk into my place, into my domicile, and go, what's going on here? And we're just sitting around watching TV. you would walk in and go, whoa, what is that? What is that? We had people come to the house that said these things. What's going on in here? And I'd say, what do you mean? Well, it's heavy in here. Like, I mean, it's oppressively heavy. It was palpable. And you knew when you felt that, I called it doom. When you felt doom in the house, that meant something was on its way. Something was going to happen that night. And everybody felt it that was in my house. My son, being little, felt it. My wife, I mean, come on. It was horrifyingly oppressive. And company, people who had no idea, by the way. And to that end, it became almost, there was a bigger sense of urgency to experience then as well. Like, he knows we've got to move. He knows. And certainly, pretty much one of the last times that I saw beings of any sort in my bedroom, in fairly dim light, but not blackness, there were 3 at the foot of the bed. And I had the presence of mind at the time to say, I've had enough of this. I know what you are. And I began to recite the Lord's Prayer, to which they winced. You ever seen an alien wince? I guarantee you it's not something you will forget. And they covered over with their hands the sides of their head as if they had ears, which they didn't, and opened their mouths to silently scream, which there was no sound. But that was the gesture that was made. The flailing back of the head, the arms coming jerkily up to the sides of the head, and the wincing of the eyes, and the whole thing faded away right in front of me. I mean, as I watched, it faded away. Now, if that's not playing the part, then I don't know what is playing the part.
Well, how did you see through that? I mean, that would be like where I go, okay, I'm a Christian now.
I don't know about...
what didn't ring true? At what point were you like, that doesn't ring true to me?
Dorothy Izot was pretty much what changed my mind about that. You know, when she remarked that her experiences were all very benign until the pastor of her church told her, you know, the things you're interacting with, they're demonic, right? You know, this is evil. And she actually doubted herself. She doubted her own experiences to the point where she said, am I being deceived? Am I being tricked? Is this what I'm falling for? And she said the minute that she began that, it began presenting itself as these little things scurrying into corners. Now, I'm very familiar with corners. It's not something you hear a lot of experiencers talk about, but I saw things in corners all the time. And so did many people who came to the house. These black shapes in corners, these seeming vibratory, I don't know, air molecules buzzing in the corner. When she talked about that, she said, it took me a long time to think about that and to regain my innocence about the experience itself. And I have to admit, it was a long while. You know, I made the statement to many people that, of course, this sounds a lot like what I say now. If you don't want it, stop thinking about it. Stop analyzing it. Stop listening to this program. If you're having this experience and you want it to stop listening to us. There is no way out here. We're going in. We're not taking you out. When you realize that you have more control over the experience than you think, and when you can influence the way it presents, you realize that this is not anything demonic. You made it evil. You make it demonic. You make it fearful. But I don't think a lot of people can help but to do that. In other words, when it presents itself initially, even if it presents kindly, having something over your vehicle or being outside and having this massive thing hovering over top of you that's not moving, that doesn't conform to your sense of reality, it's inherently fearful. At least I believe to the Western mind it is.
But it could be a case of, just like I was saying before, Metagorgy. It could have presented itself as the Fatima sightings. Why doesn't it? Why doesn't it be like, yes, you're afraid because you're cowering in the presence of your savior?
Right, right. why doesn't it present as something that you can get your head around, in other words?
Well,
right?
something
Or
that if it doesn't want the fear, or if it cares at all about your fear, why doesn't it alleviate it in some way? Like even saying, okay, if you need fear to be here for some reason, if you need to evoke fear for that connection to be open, then why not do it like, yeah, you're afraid because I'm an angel. And so it's normal. It's okay to be afraid, you know?
Right.
Instead, you get like reports of sort of that robotic, like, do not be afraid, or, you know, the thing that you don't trust.
You know, it says don't be afraid, and you go, nah.
Right. Yeah, and why didn't it do that with the kids at Metagorgy, or with the kids at Fatima, or any of those types of things?
Or for that matter, if you believe the Bible, you know, fear not, I bring tidings of great joy, right? And they're on their knees shaking in absolute terror, you know, when it's the birth of the Lord, right? So I think that there is a component of this that requires fear. And I don't know how many people will subscribe to my thought on it, but I believe that fear is the absolute root emotion. Everything is born from fear. And I think in no small way that this thing still, as dramatic as it sounds, as bizarre as it presents, as glitchy as an appearance can tend to be, I don't think it can be stressed enough that the reason that people remember these things so strongly is because they were in abject terror, that they were, in fact, very afraid of this. But the very fact that it exists so far on the periphery of perception, I don't think that can be ignored. You know, there is that component to this that. Does it require fear to inject itself into memory? Is this what makes you hold on to it or go, meh, whatever? Is this the thing that makes the impression? The hot branding iron, you know?
Did Dorothy Izot have fear before the priest told her to?
Initially, I think in her initial thing, yes, she was very concerned when 3 men, she calls them men, walked into her bedroom in the middle of the night. Yeah, I think she was concerned, yes. But after that, you know, after they literally told her, I think they said, you don't have to be afraid of this. We're here to teach you things. And we want you to tell people about this. You know, we're going to show you things. We're going to show you phenomena. You know, and there's a woman right there that has some pretty ridiculous pictures that don't really conform to what one would look for when you say a UFO photograph, but there are some very interesting effects that her single frame of film has. I mean, it's an interesting case. Anybody who wants to know more about it can go look at a website called Capturing the Light. Just do Capturing the Light in Google, and you should come across the film. Izat, I-Z-A-T-T is her last name. And I believe the film is online now that you can watch it. Frank Longo is a friend of mine, and he directed the film and put it all together. It's a great film. I don't necessarily agree that everything that's presented in it is the phenomena, but I think the great bulk of it is. But here's the takeaway from that, is that this woman takes an old film camera and she records these lights in the sky or solid objects in the sky. And in one frame, and only one frame out of thousands of frames shot at a single event, one frame will contain light anomalies all over it. It is not a physical impossibility that it could be faked, but it's a physical impossibility when the light phenomena writes her name. And it's also a phenomena when these still frames are blown up and you can see alternate landscapes than the landscape that she is shooting. Alternate people that aren't there. And I might make note that when you take her picture and you set it against the wall and you take a picture of her picture, you get light phenomena from the photograph. So that's really interesting. And you know what? This movie came out. People looked at the pictures and they went, nah, I don't see the big deal. Isn't that the way it always is? It's not, it's not going to be Jeremy Vaeni's experiences or Jeff Ritzmann's experiences that get made into a movie. It's going to be the cookie cutter, standardized version of it all. That's going to be the thing that everybody knows about. So, we have no use for these pictures that show light smears and all sorts of jiggly lines. That doesn't do it for us. We want a flying saucer. Well, of course you do. And that's exactly why you're not going to get it from her. So I encourage everybody to check it out. Capturing the Light. I believe it's capturingthelight.com. So go check that out. Or Dorothy Izat, Izatt. Just check that out. Google it and put UFO next to her name, and you'll definitely come up with a lot of interesting things. That said, she's a complete New Ager from what I've read about her writings. She is steeped in the New Age thing. She talks about her experiences on film in a very honest, very forthright, very, dry way. But her own thoughts about it are odd to me. But that to me is also the marginal part of the case where it sticks out.
Well, let's just circle back for a second. When you thought that this was demonic in your life, is that the time when that wax symbol appeared on your mirror? Was it around that time?
Yeah, but that came at a point where I had first realized this by kind of looking back on all of the people that I had talked to up until that point. So I had a pretty extensive file system and pretty interesting stuff on the computer as far as a few case studies I had done. Some I had done with Lee in the Experience of Support group that we belonged to at the time. And some people that had just randomly called that I had made contact with either on the phone or in person or both. And so I'd kept tabs on these people through the course of years. And I had become so, just fed up with not getting or not feeling like I was getting anywhere with it that I sat down one day, I put all these people's contact information into one file. And I just randomly started calling them and or emailing them, asking them, how are you doing? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. And the pattern that I saw was, I had one guy that had a sighting who was a pastor. And he had left the church, was no longer a pastor, was working as an auto mechanic in another state. Had I not had his email, I probably wouldn't have even been able to contact him. Another couple, they were newly married. They got divorced. I think I spoke to the wife. The husband didn't want to talk about it. It was that kind of thing over and over and over. It was like obvious. To the point where one of the couples, or more of the couples than not, I suppose, told me in as many words that it was directly attributable to one of them being engrossed in the subject from the time of their experience, and the other one being not engrossed in the experience at all. In fact, wanting to leave it behind. And because of that, there was friction and conflict, and that just tore the marriage asunder. I found that a lot. And then I found some other things that just kind of led me to believe that there were, that this was, for lack of a better definition, demonic. And the worst part about it is that I realized this. I'm looking, and every place I'm looking, I'm seeing these constants of this very negative response or toxic reaction to the people and the phenomena. And I remember having to give a pretty major talk in DC the following weekend. And I'm like, okay, so what do I do? Do I go in there and do I talk about my experiences with this stuff and all of that? Or do I do what my conscience tells me to do, which is to tell people to walk away from it, to ignore it, to realize it for what it is. But I knew that to do that would be, I knew that I'll put it to you this way, I knew that was not a popular viewpoint in ufology. And I knew that in doing that, I was doing a lot of lectures. I was doing, and these were not lectures that exist like they do for me today, where I have 6 people show up in Virginia. This is when I had like 60, 80 people or more at a clip. And people really seemed to be engaged with what I was saying. And I knew that if I wanted to be able to talk to people still about this stuff, that I would not be able to say, I think this is demonic. And so I was fighting with that and trying to figure out, how do I broach this so that I feel like I'm doing the responsible thing, but not, essentially commit UFO suicide so that nobody ever pays attention to me again. And I wrestled with this for days. I mean, days. And I think somewhere during the night, I believe it was on a weekend, it was a Friday night, we had a couple come over and we were friends with them, and I was talking to them. They knew everything about our experiences because they had experienced it themselves as well in the house. And our bedroom was kind of a mess, so Lisa shut the door and locked it, and it was locked all night. And then when they left around 3 a.m., 2:30, 3 o'clock, we went to bed. Woke up the next morning. I was putting on my coat. We were going to the grocery store, and I look on one of our upright mirrors on the chest of drawers, and there is this symbol on this mirror, and freaked me out. I said to Lisa, did you do this? She said, no, I didn't do it. I know I didn't do it. It appeared on first glance to be etched into the mirror, like scraped into the mirror. And it wasn't. It was a waxy substance. And it could have easily been a candle wax. It could have been anything like that. And I think it's some weeks prior, I had attended a lecture by Mario Pasaglini, who did the book that everyone's out to get, which is Alien Writing. I have a copy of it. And so I called him. And I drew the symbol down as exact as I could do. And I faxed it to him. And he wrote me back, or he called me back, and he said, well, it doesn't have a literal translation. He said it's a form of angelic writing, but this is assembled in such a way as that he had not seen before. And he said that seems to describe a kind of urgent notion to the message. And I said, well, what does it mean? And he said, well, there's not a literal translation, but what it's conveying is something along the lines of, now you know, do you have the courage to stand up for what you believe? He's like, does this mean anything to you in life right now? Like, I'm like, well, yeah. So when I went to DC, I blew it wide open, and I talked about it as frankly as I could, and got a standing ovation, which surprised the heck out of me. And I was deluged with people after the lecture. Like, that had never really happened to that amount before. But a lot of people saying, I see what you're saying. I see what you're talking about. I don't know if demonic is the right word. I said, I don't know if it's the right word either, but it feels toxic. It feels not good.
What do you think happens to you if you stick with that line of thinking and it's challenging you and it's saying, yeah, we're demonic. Now, do you have the courage to stand up to this? What do you think is at the end of that tunnel? I'm just curious. If you stand up for yourself and you have the courage of your beliefs.
I mean, I essentially did. And I did have people who, it was some months later, but I did have people who said, that they viewed me, because I did start what was the first experiencer support group on the internet. which oddly enough existed on AOL, because there was no quote unquote internet at the time, or World Wide Web. And so we had that. And, I would tell people in no uncertain terms when they came into the group that what my thoughts were on it, what I had seen and experienced. I would send them an email about what I had gathered. I said, if this sounds at all familiar to you, we should probably talk about it. And I had people within the group who had been in the group from the get-go, who basically mutinied on the group and said that they viewed me as potentially dangerous to people who were coming into the group scared already, and I was scaring them more. And my answer was, well, good. I think they should be scared. I think they should walk away from this, because that seems to be the only way to effectively stop it. And back then, of course, this was the whole point, was not only how do we deal with this, but if there's a way to stop it, how do we stop this? And so, that group basically imploded, because that's what these groups do. But I was, I think what surprised me was that I expected huge fallout from that lecture that I gave that day. And what I got was, well, I'll put it this way. If anybody is really familiar with ufologists, and I'm talking about ones that are from the old school and were really keen observers, Richard Hall is a name that comes up, as he was the oldest living ufologist up until a couple of years ago when he passed away. A really sharp guy. I saw him in the audience. It just made me more nervous. And yet when we went out to eat after the thing was over, pretty much the entire group of people, or a large contingency of the crowd there, went to the same restaurant to eat. And Richard Hall made a beeline for me on the floor of this restaurant. I thought, man, here it comes, And he took my hand and he put his hand over top mine, and he's shaking my hand. And he says, I just wanted to come over and congratulate you on that talk, because that was amazing. And I said, well, thank you. And he kind of laughed and said, I'm serious. That was really great. And I got this sense from him that this was something that he thought but couldn't say or wouldn't say. I just got that impression, although I don't know that that's the truth. I got this sense that I said something that maybe he wanted to say and couldn't or wouldn't. I don't know. It was a weird vibe, but he was obviously surprised that somebody like me would say this, and was very interested in everything that I had to say at that point. And at that point is when everybody else at the speaker table, as I was coming back to the table, they were commenting that he didn't congratulate any of them. So I wasn't ever invited back to that conference again. And there have been other ones. So I was blacklisted, but not for the reason that I guess you would think.
For once.
Yeah. But some people did walk out. I mean, Lisa was in the audience, and she said that two women behind her said, I'm not listening to this crap, and they walked out. But they were the only two that walked out. And no one really came up to me when it was done and attacked me for what I had to say. Now, I should say that the lady who facilitated this whole thing, once I got done speaking, it was kind of like going to the X conference, where if Steve Bassett doesn't hear extraterrestrial, he comes up and says, well, if even one of these things was extraterrestrial, I mean, hey, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Well, it was kind of that same thing, because when I got done talking, this woman came up and said, well, obviously Jeff has had experiences with very negative beings, but we're certain he doesn't mean that this is everybody. And I said, well, actually I do. I said it into the mic, and, kind of brought that discussion to a standstill. But I think that embarrassed her, and this was more a love and light crowd anyway. So,
What do you make of that in terms of experiencers? Like, obviously, love and light crowd for people who haven't had experiences is one thing, but because we were talking before about fear has to be a necessary component of this, but we've met people who, at least on the surface, seem to not have had that or claim not to, and they have sort of a space brothery take on it. But one of them, was Susan Kornacki, right? But yet what she was talking about on our show was how her experiences had changed to shrouded beings from, so similar to you. So it's like, well, we can't discount her the way we want to.
Right. Yeah.
So what do you do with that? I mean, what do you make of that? Because I guess I am vainglorious in many ways. And one of them is I'd like to think that, I don't know. I don't even know if I can say this without saying we're chosen. But if you're somehow engaging this, or if you're chosen for it, I don't know. Either way, I would like to think that there's something about you that is worth engaging, that you're intelligent about it, that you're always at the top of your intelligence, that you're always engaging the mystery, that you're always asking the questions, or else you're not an experiencer, really. But maybe that's not fair. Maybe there are people who are experiencers and think that they have answers and stick with them. But you would think that if they were disingenuous answers, that the phenomena would go away in their lives or something. I don't know, but
I think it kind of goes to what you have said to me, and I by no means. I mean, if our audience doesn't know this by now, I'll say it plainly. I don't understand Jeremy's experience. I don't get the I am thing. I get it to a degree, but I don't get it to the degree, obviously, that he gets it. But one of the things that you told me, Jer, was that when you had the experience, you kind of walked through the point where at some point you felt like, yeah, I'm psychic. I have psychic intuition here. I've got psychic things going on, but that's just a stop along the way of going to the next step. You said people can get hung up on the psychic thing and that's where they stay. And I have to wonder if that when it comes to like people who just think that they're Arcturians from, the Pleiades, that's just where they stop. It may have presented itself as that, but that may be some amalgamation of themselves, popular culture, and the phenomena together. But they don't go any further than that. Like, they don't question it. They just say, it's Arcturians from Pleiades. The end. I'm here. They're great people. I mean, so you really should meet them.
I don't know. I mean, but if you stop there, I mean, does the phenomenon stop there with you and play to that? I mean, what does the phenomenon get out of that if you're not growing in any sort of way? If you're not,
right?
I mean, you would think that there is a point. I almost said an agenda, but that's even too much editorializing. You'd think that there's a point on the other end of this. And if you're stuck or delusional or something, then the point is lost on you. Does it go away, or does it just keep giving you fake answers? Huh.
No, I think it does go away. I knew quite a few of those people back in the early 90s, late 80s about, the people who really believed it was benevolent space brothers and this sort of thing. And anything that they got that was of a negative flavor was just kind of like, they said, it was explained to me that it's just kind of a necessary evil. Like, you have to go through this to get to the good part. And yeah, okay. I get that. And then you get the people who would cry to you on the phone at 3:00 in the morning saying they just wanted it to stop. They just wanted to stop. How do I get out of this? I can't get out of this. They can come whenever they want. They can do whatever they want. There's nothing I can do about it. And I've come to that realization, but I can't accept it. And you get such both sides that are just so far and extreme that, I mean, what I found was that a lot of people who had the uber positive stuff, that the experiences didn't last for them. And often they found themselves in something else, like in some other kind of participatory plane with the phenomena, whether it be ghost or ESP or, but they always kind of like, haven't you ever met these people who are psychic who say, well, it all started when I was a kid. I had these beings who visited me at night and so on and so forth. they become those people. They become those people who say, these experiences happened over the course of 3 years and it completely changed my life. And now I do this.
It's the UFO version of guru. You become a teacher, a guru, a channel, a this.
You become something. You become
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but you ultimately, the experience stops and you have to make sense of then why it stopped. And I firmly believe that there are people who, there was a man that I used to know, probably, it's hard to think how old he looked when I was so young. I was probably 30. I would guess he was maybe getting close to 50. And he would go on and on about, this disrupts my life. I got in trouble with my wife because I was driving home and they came and I was an hour late and she didn't know where I was. And this has really disrupted my life. I'm scared to go outside after dark. This is ridiculous. It's debilitating. And, and I can't, it was kind of a twofold thing that happened over the course of a month or so. And I said, well, I'm just going to say John. I said, John, if you could stop this, would you? Because you first have to see, are they open to listening to what you have to say that you think will stop it? And he said, well, not if there's something to learn. I'm like, wait a minute. This is debilitating to your life. You're getting in trouble with your wife. They can do it's horrifyingly scary to you. But if there's something to learn, you want it to stay around. That seems odd to me. And then he asked me, he says, okay, I want it to stop. What do I do? And I had like a 3-hour conversation with him about how stuff seems to respond to your attention. And the more attention you give to it, the more you seem to get, and blah, blah, blah. And so the best way to get rid of it, if you don't want it, is to involve yourself in something else and never look back. Don't engage it. Don't read about it. Don't turn the TV on and watch a UFO show. Don't watch your videotapes, which he was big on videotaping conferences and lectures and all that, and traded them. And he had a huge collection of UFO stuff. And I said, get rid of it. I said, don't watch it. Like, put it away. It's like an addiction. I said, stay away from it. And he did. And it stopped. And he was completely and thoroughly disappointed. And that's the only way I know to describe it. He's like, I don't know. I mean, they left, they're gone. I'm like, okay, well, that's good, right? Well, I don't know. Like, I feel like I've lost something here, like a chance at something. I'm like, okay, at what? I don't know. But what did I do that turned them off so much that they don't come around anymore? Like, I'm pleading to see something. Like, you wanted this to stop, but yet they're grossly disappointed when this leaves their life. What is that?
Well, yeah, you get this even in the normal literature, hypnosis or whatever literature, the thing of this is negative, and then when it goes away, oh, what did I do?
Right.
Why is this gone? It seems to be a common through line, which people chalk up as Stockholm syndrome or something, please the abuser and that sort of thing.
Right.
But I don't buy that. I think there's something else going on.
I think there is something else going on under the surface. Something is going on that even people like you and I who have dissected this crap 6 ways from Sunday can't quite put our finger on. And something is going on under the surface of all these things that is something. I don't know how else to explain it. There's something that we're not recognizing about it. I mean,
what's interesting is it's like even under the surface of itself, it's all a facade. It tells you essentially if that translation of that symbol is correct. So now you know. What are you going to do about it?
Right.
And,
exactly.
the only correct answer is antithetical to the question. It's a parallel answer because the question involves you playing along and saying, well, I'm either going to Christ you out of the room or I'm going to hail Satan or cower in fear. But really what you're ultimately say is Well, my answer is I don't believe any of it. And that is the same thing as the climactic scene in the Communion movie, right? They show him, the magician shows Whitley the alien. He says, I want to know what's underneath that. He takes off the mask. It's a reptilian looking snout thing. And he says, I don't believe that either. And the guy says, that's right.
That's a good trick.
Yeah, you're not going to get to know. And isn't that interesting? The climactic moment of, of all the answers that we want in this movie is you're not going to get any answers. That's your answer. And, at least
like a box. It's like a Chinese box. You open one, there's another one underneath of that.
And at least the Whitley Strieber character in the movie is completely satisfied with that. Goes home, he's whistling, he's happy again, and it's like, well, I've got my answer. At least now I know. I don't get to know.
Right. I just came home to get my stuff. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
So that's the answer that it seeks, right? To keep going with this is not to give into the question that it presents. Or the answer that it presents, and then the next step in that answer, which is a question. So what do you want to do about this now that you know? Because the answer is no, you just presented another lie to me. You just reconfirmed my own belief system. And then it's like, yep, you passed that test, green light.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing about me, when I look back on that time at this point, where I go, no, that's not what this is, clearly, because it's so much more complex than that kind of black and white answer, is that it motivated me into action. Now is kind of the motivator. Now you know something. Now what are you going to do about it? You're going to stand up for what you believe. So, it's inevitably, it's motivating you into action. And I motivated myself into action based on that. So it got action out of me, essentially to burn myself at the stake. And I certainly, I don't see that as a detrimental part, because I guess I'm one of the odd men out in ufology, because I'm not ashamed to admit when I have made mistakes or errors in my thinking about this stuff, which doesn't happen nearly as much as it should probably. But I think it led me down that place to make me realize that even the most certain things that I feel about this phenomena are wrong. I think that was, if I look back on that and I say, okay, what was the point in presenting itself like that? Well, the answer was, you presented it like that. You made it that,
But there's still an element of a test being given.
And there is, yes. But
even if you're creating the level, even if this is Super Mario Maker, you're creating the levels, but ultimately there's a programmer behind that software that makes the meaning between jumping from point A to point B. Correct. That's out of your hands. Yes. You're just putting these levels together.
Right.
And it's the same thing. I don't
have the pixel blocks. Right.
Yeah. And I think it's the same thing when your shrouded guy, when you jumped back and realized that his fabric was made out of the same stuff you were covered with when you were a kid. And he said, oh, I didn't realize that was going to happen. I'm out of here. I think that was the same test. I don't think that, I don't think that was true. I think it's the same thing when I had that meditation energy thing that turned into a hallucinatory thing that turned into a dream in one night. I don't even know if you'll remember this, but essentially these, 3 seals in the dream coming up out of this pool, and, one of them staring into my eyes, and me seeing this vision of my sister going off with some sort of dude, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, a scene that didn't need to provoke any sort of emotion, but it provoked this emotion of, essentially me crying. I mean, in real life, waking up crying that I could have done something and didn't. And, but the moral to the story, and Seal basically told me, that you still have attachments, that you're not ready yet. Like, that was the point, is, oh no, you're still attached emotionally to something. Like, and in the West we go, well, duh, that's family. Like, of course, why wouldn't, but there's the Buddhist thing of, no attachment means no attachment. I don't know if they're playing by Buddhist rules, but that certainly seems to be very close of like, yeah, you're not what you think you are, which is ready for what's next.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
and again, very similar to the Strieber thing in the movie, at least, of I think they wanted me to go with me. I think they meant forever, or whatever the line is.
Right.
And of course, fairy folklore of come with us forever, except this wasn't necessarily come with us forever, but it's sort of be altered forever. You know, whatever the next thing is in this is forever, and you're not there yet.
Yeah. Although we don't know, it could mean walk through the purple door and disappear forever.
Well, yeah,
we just don't know.
That.
We just don't know. But I'm not willing to make that leap that people on milk cartons have been abducted by aliens. But I mean,
well, that's your loss, man.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just one of those things where, you know, to look back on your life with this stuff and to realize certain things, you know, I think is all part of how this works. You know, you are supposed to be retrospective about what you've seen, what you've experienced, and then kind of look back to where you are today with this. You know, like I said, Dorothy Izot was the one that really my ears perked up and I went, what did she say? It does that? It can do that? Well, yeah, why not? It presents as different things, different people culturally. Why couldn't it present as you expect it to present?
Was that when, did you discover her when we met, or was that before we met? Because I thought that was all around the time we were doing Paratopia, maybe.
It was, I don't think it was during Paratopia. I think it was before that.
But if you're stuttering, then it must have been somewhat around there. I mean, my point is like, wow, that's a long time for you to think this is demonic to then go back on it.
Oh, yeah. I thought it for a long time. Yeah. Years. Yeah, absolutely.
Even though you were working on sightings and all that stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Well, sightings was actually before that. I was working for Periscope on AOL when I came to that realization of that. Of the time.
So how do you come to the conclusion that it's like, what came first to you? Did you think it was aliens first, or did you think it was demons all the way through, even though you were hanging out with people who believed it was aliens?
You mean, where did I start with it?
Yeah. Did you ever believe it was aliens?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think I ever believed it was spacemen. But I did believe that there was, just by virtue of what I experienced in just about everyday life, you know, seeing, what amounted to faint ghosts of aliens, you know, faint shapes of those bodies walking through the house, or, and Lee would see these things. He would recognize these things. I mean, we had some pretty wild experiences, in the condo with these things, and I always, just by virtue of that sort of stuff, always kind of looked at like this is an extra dimensional type of phenomena of some kind or another. And I think I always at some point thought that, and I don't know why, I don't know what ever touched me off in this direction to think that these things are profoundly involved in what happens to us after we die. I've thought that probably since the get-go. But then there was this disconnect of, well, why do they need, you know, these solid nut and bolt craft to travel around in if they're that? And, you know, of course, at that point, you really do think that these are ghosts in machines flying around, which is weird. That's a weird thought to have. And then at some point, you know, the notion of the UFO as a living entity came up, and then later on it became a manifestation of some sort, not a nuts and bolts thing, that it's as manifested as the alien facade is. But I went pretty much from aliens to to saying, yeah, this is profoundly demonic or toxic. I never went by way of like the Bible as an explanation of any of this stuff. Like, that's not where I went. I went from the standpoint that look what happens to people who interact with this. And then, I thought that for many years, and I would tell people who had a sighting, look, this is, inherently negative, in my opinion. People call it demonic. I think this is where demonic came from. This is what that is. I don't know necessarily that it's devils and pitchforks and God on the other end tugging both. But I thought, if there's a team to be on, I'm not on that team, and you got to pick a team. And I thought this for a number of years. I really did, to the point where I could, and it was uncanny in some cases, because I would say to people who had a sighting where they saw an odd array of lights or even a structured craft of some kind, I would say, you have pictures of it? Yes. So, well, you need to send them to me, but let me just ask you a question out of thin air. Was there a pattern of lights that was similar? Yes. Okay. Or a number of angles on a craft or windows or whatever. And I would say, now, was there 7 consistencies or 13? And they would go, what do you mean? I'd say, what do you mean what I mean? Was there consistencies of 7 or 13? Well, yeah, there were 7 lights. Or, well, there were 13 windows. Or there were, 13 angles. Or there were 7, whatever. How would you know that? And, I don't know why. I don't know why. I still don't know why to this day. But 7 and 13 are very common in structured anomalies or lighted anomalies. But when you look into spiritual history, 7 and 13 are very important numbers, right? 7 being in service to God, 13 being in opposition. These kinds of things that you hear about and you read about in spiritual texts. And so that became like almost an affirmation of, well, you see, it's, this is all spiritual warfare. That's what this is. I'm not sure I believe in God, but I know something is out there that doesn't mean us good. And so that's what I thought for years. And then I kind of, I went away from it for about 2.5, 3 years. And when I came back into it, this is how I came back. I kind of started keeping track of sightings. And Lisa would say to me, what are you looking at? What are you doing? And I'd say, well, it never hurts to know what it's doing and how it's presenting. And I kind of kept my distance for a while. And slowly you become interested in it again, and you start seeing chinks in the armor that you've built up as, this is what I think this is. And I started seeing things that didn't conform to that pattern, that didn't make sense to that. And maybe it was because I was just so neck deep in it that I couldn't see what was already there. And sooner or later, you get into it again. You start talking to people again. You go to a couple conferences. I met you at one. And of course, Vaeni and I were doing stuff, and that was interesting and interesting in more than one way. And you slowly got back into it. And that was when Dorothy Izot kind of floated across my desk. It wasn't long after we met. I know that. And the reason I'm trying to think is because I was supposed to be on a Paracast episode. There's a dirty word around here, right? With Vaeni, because we were supposed to interview Frank Longo, and we ultimately wanted to interview Dorothy. And they had Frank Longo on the show to talk about the Izot case. And I said, you got to get us an interview with this woman. We got to talk to this woman. I got to talk to her. And he talked to Frank, and long story short, he pretty much blew the idea of ever talking to her completely out of the water because he accused Frank of being like a key holder to her case and this, that, and the other. And all Frank was trying to do was trying to, to vet people a little bit to say, are they nuts? Are they not? And Frank called me and he says, hey, I was perfectly willing to introduce you guys over the phone and maybe set up some kind of something. But the attitude that I got from David was just not good. And so he's not welcome, but you are. And I said, great. And then it never happened. I mean, it just never happened. I wrote her a letter. Frank delivered that letter. I heard from her daughter saying she had gotten the letter, but I never got a response back. And so all I could say about that case is that was what kind of snapped my head back into saying, this presents as you expect it to present. And little did I know that when we would talk to George Hansen, that his idea of marginality, anti-structure, change, upheaval, would be the consistency that is seen throughout paranormal events in general, not just UFOs, not just aliens, but ghosts, ESP, psychic abilities, all of these high strangeness events, paranormal events, that this is what accompanies this. This is not a product of, it's just what accompanies it.
Does it accompany mainstream religion as well? Or do you not know that?
You mean that sort of consistencies?
Yeah, I mean, does trickster theory apply to Catholicism?
have you ever seen a church that doesn't have massive amounts of drama?
Okay, fair enough.
I have not.
But have you ever seen anything that doesn't? I mean, at some point you got to say, well, there's just human beings.
Yes.
And if you've got marginalized subjects, they're going to attract marginal people. I mean, that's just kind of duh.
Yeah.
I mean, who finds their home in things that are not mainstream? People who feel like outsiders, and a lot of those people probably for good reason.
Right.
So,
right. Well, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And let's be honest, that a lot of them are headstrong like us and don't want to, are not willing to put up with a lot of nonsense, like that's on the website for this show. You're tired of the nonsense. And yeah, and inevitably, like,
and it's an excellent website, by the way, Jeff.
Thanks.
I haven't seen it. Just
simple and to the point is
yes.
where I was going with that.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, a church. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of drama in a church, and I think looking at one that the ones that married Lisa and I mean, it was her church, or her family's church. They helped build it. Yeah, boatloads of drama. I mean, and out of nowhere. And the church eventually, I mean, I think at this point has fallen into such a state as there's nobody going anymore, and they're thinking about closing it. And churches close all the time. I mean, this is a given. So, yeah, I think it does attend religious stuff as well. Now, Catholicism, I think it's different there. I think it's a revolving door. I think people get turned off by something a priest says or something that happens in the congregation. They don't go back. But that wheel keeps it rolling. I think only because it's a little bit more funded and better organized than most. But yeah, I think it does. But I mean, when George came on and talked to us about that stuff, I said, holy crap, this fits into exactly what I recognized like years ago. Now I've got somebody who's saying, yeah, this is what surrounds this stuff. You have to look at what surrounds it. George, like Dorothy, changed my life. I mean, because when you can finally see a consistency of some kind in this madness, that's a huge deal. And I do, in fact, see it. And when I point it out to others, it's like they have an epiphany about it. That conference that I spoke at in Virginia, 5 or 6 people showed up because it was a bad slot at the end of the day. When I mentioned to a couple of ladies there, I said, who belongs to a ghost hunting group? They put their hands up. I said, great. I bet your group is like a revolving door. There's always some kind of drama going on. Somebody hates somebody else. Their jaw is hung in the air. They couldn't believe it. They're like, my God, how do you know this? Yes, everything you're saying is yes. I mean, they see it. And I say, this is what it is. It surrounds this stuff. This is what happens. I said, but I bet you get a fair amount of decent documentable activity. Yes, we do. Yeah, I bet you do. And they wonder how you could possibly know this. And I say, you need to read George Hansen's book, because it doesn't give you an answer as to what it is. So don't go there looking for it. Don't go looking for, if you're looking for consistencies, as George said, you're looking in the wrong place with the paranormal. But I count marginality, anti-structure, binary opposition examples and whatnot. All of these things kind of attend paranormal events. And that to me is consistent enough to know, okay, we're on to something. What is that? It could, and the answer may be, and I'm perfectly willing to accept this answer. The answer may be, it's folly. That's it. It's folly. It's something to do between birth and death. I'm perfectly accepting of that. I don't think that's what it is.
Well, how would that work exactly? I mean, then there wouldn't be another intelligence involved, right? There
would be no point to it, to any of it. The point would be there is no point, and that's certainly a viable option at this point. It is. I mean, we can't throw it off the table, but I think that there's enough breadcrumbs thrown along here that there's something going on here. But what it is I think far more complex than anything that we've ever been able to throw at it. And that includes anything Jacques Vallée would say or write about. And I think by and large, it's too conceptually difficult for us even to moderately understand. But I think that is the challenge, is to try the effort in trying to understand different things. And it's and I've said this before, I've learned next to nothing about this phenomena itself, but I've learned a whole crap ton about me, myself, and I, and my interactions with other people. The value of words, the value of talking. It's been a benefit overall. I can say that overall. But there's been some extremely unsettling stuff along the way.
Well, let me ask you this. Speaking of folly versus actual anything to be gotten out of this, did you get a chance to look at the article Karen Totten posted in the Paratopia Facebook page called "Milky Way is on the outskirts of immeasurable heaven supercluster"?
I did not. Excuse me.
Well, good. While you're on the air here, look at that now and tell me if that is, in fact, the lint multiverse you saw, as opposed to bubbles.
Let me have a look-see on my iPad.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. I'm looking at a link that you shared. Says, this painting of Ben Carson and Jesus in Ben Carson's home is the blackest thing I've ever seen.
And don't just look at the front page, but actually click on the article, because there's like a YouTube video of this, and the first image in the YouTube video is probably it. Okay. I'm supposed to click on the YouTube video? No, you just click on the picture or whatever to the article, and I'm just saying that first image on the YouTube video that looks like a lighted lint. Is that what you saw? Not exactly, no. But I'll tell you what that does look like, that our home supercluster still frame of the first frame of the YouTube video, that's a fractal flame. That's what that is. That I recognize instantly because I work with them at work. I use them as abstract backgrounds on some stuff. And a fractal flame is a fractal, essentially. It's just a one with a lot of nodes, and it looks flamey. This is exactly what a fractal flame looks like. And so if you look up, I'm sure if you look up on Google, fractal flame, you will see something that looks not dissimilar from that. Now, what I remember is something that looks like
Like literally, if you went into the dryer vent and pulled out a tuft of lint and threw it on a white piece of paper, I guess that's. It's just that tenderly fuzzy fuzz, like fuzz. I guess this could be close if you. I mean, I guess if you kind of squint your eyes and you kind of blend the colors together a little bit, it's similar, but it's not tendrilled like that by any stretch. It was more clustered and like cotton candy fluff, like fluff.
Right.
I don't know how to explain that.
No, yeah, there's more substance to it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's a fractal flame for sure. I mean, without a doubt.
That's what we live in.
I've generated fractal flames that look almost exactly like that. So yeah, I mean, it's there's the fractal again. So
well, hey, here's a question I should have asked you a while back. When you were talking about the symbol that showed up on your mirror, you said your friends in your home had an experience. What was their experience?
A lot of things. The male of the pair, he was with me for a pretty close proximity sighting, which I believe and have believed for years was literally meant for him. He was a skeptic of sorts and actually pretty hardcore skeptic about the experiences that I related to him. And despite the fact that he had seen like flashes of light, I know I've mentioned the times where Lisa and I would be even at the mall, in the mall parking lot, or outside the condo, or in the condo, or wherever. It didn't matter where we were. It would look like somebody took an Instamatic flashbulb and flashed it. You wouldn't see the origin of the light. You would just see the whole room go, like that flash of white light. We saw that, oh my God, all the time. I mean, all the time. And you always got this feeling of proximity, like something was close when that would happen. But you didn't see anything. You just saw like white light everywhere. There was no origin point for it. They saw that in the condo more than a couple of times. At one point they left because they just are like, the girl was just freaked out by it. Saw it on the step going into the condo one night, them with us again. And like I said, the man, it was literally the night, and I'm sure if any of you if you're not too young, you'll remember the Hale-Bopp suicides. The day that was announced, of course, the Hale-Bopp comet was still massively huge in the sky. And he and another friend of ours stopped down to my shop. I was running a sign shop at the time. Stopped in and said, hey, John's got a telescope. Let's go look at Hale-Bopp tonight. And we went up to the place I took you, Jeremy, at the church parking lot, probably the highest point in the area you can see for miles. And we saw the Hale-Bopp comet. It was to our right as we went into the driveway. And we stood out in front of the place just talking and looking at the comet. You certainly didn't need a telescope. It looked like somebody had taken a brush of sparkles across the sky. Amazing. Little light pollution up there. So at the time, you could see it really clearly. And slowly the conversation turned to, is there anybody out there? Are we alone? Blah, blah, blah. That same old kind of thing. And, well, Jeff's seen a lot of weird stuff up here and blah, blah, blah. And the male of the couple said, I'll call him Bob. And Bob says, yeah, I know says he's seen a lot of stuff up here. I don't know how much of it I can believe, but, he said he's seen a lot of stuff. And at a certain point, we're kind of in this triangular stance, being three people, and he points between me and John and gets real animated looking. And I said, come on, man, quit effing around. I don't need to be freaked out. I've had a lot of weird stuff come up here, just don't. And he's like, dude, I'm not. I just saw something absolutely massive, treetop level over there, and it banked really quickly to the right. So he stays at my truck. John and I walk down to the end of the driveway at the church. And we're standing there looking at these trees where he says it was over top and it banked in front of them. And John says to me, I'll never forget this. He said, do you think he's trying to BS us? Do you think he's fooling around? I said, I don't know. And just as I said that, Bob begins screaming obscenities, such obscenities you've never heard come out of a human mouth in a church parking lot, no less. And we spin around to see him at my truck, looking straight up from there, pointing up in the sky. What the F is that? Over and over, top of his lungs, screaming blue murder. And here is this boomerang. It's black, but there are a bank of blue lights in the front and a bank of blue lights on the back, and it's perfectly tracing the periphery of this thing. And John had a spotlighter, and he shone the spotlighter on it. And when he did, you could see that it was a matte black body. There was something solid in between the lights, in other words. And I said, put that down. I practically knocked it out of his hands. And when he took the light off of it, the lights dimmed slightly, and then it literally slid through the sky into darkness. So the lights dimmed down slightly, then they brightened up, and then it slid away. And as it slid away, the lights went black because you couldn't see them anymore. You couldn't see it departing. It just slid. And I don't know if I can describe that well enough. It wasn't like the thing was flying. It really wasn't flying. It was still, I mean, no higher than maybe a telephone pole or a telephone pole and a half in height. Very low. And after it left, I got in the truck. I said, that's it. We're going. I'm out of here. I was really shaken up. But Bob was far worse than I, being the skeptic who had just seen something very close and very undeniably not normal. And I just mentioned this on another program. He literally went through a pack of Marlboro Reds in about 20 minutes. I mean, just puffing them away and throwing them down and lighting another one and puffing. I mean, he was a nervous wreck for hours after that. And I told him, okay, I said, and here's a perfect example. I said, okay, you saw it. So there it is. Okay, so this doesn't mean you have to pursue this anymore. Just walk away from it. Just leave it alone. You don't need it in your life. Just walk away. You had a sighting. Very interesting. Now go do something else. Well, he didn't. And he went back up there the next night with John, and they watched, and they didn't see anything. And he came back to my shop that next day, and he said, I think it's you. I think you draw this stuff in. I think it's you. You need to go back up. I said, I'm not going back up there. They continued to go up and never saw anything. And he came over to my house one night alone, and we talked about it. And I said, you got to stop with this. You got to stop obsessing about it, because you're going to get more, and it's not going to be good for you. I said, I can tell you that. And he went home that night, and he called me the next day and said that when he pulled up in the driveway, the garage door opened. And I said, okay. And he said, there's no electric garage door opener on the door. We have to lift it up by hand. I said, oh, your brother didn't do it? No, my brother was asleep, dude. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. Oh, okay. He's like, so I got out of the car and I kind of looked in, but there were no lights on. But I heard something. I said, what did you hear? He's like, I don't know what it was. Like a scuffling. I said, okay. He's like, and then a basketball came out of the the bay door, the big door open front door, about waist height. It came out with some force at me, bouncing down the driveway. I said, what did you do? He goes, I dropped the ball in the yard and I went in the house as quickly as possible. And I said, you see what's going on here? You need to stop. You need to walk away from this. That was pretty much one of the last times that I talked to him, because at that point, he didn't want anything to do with me either, which was probably to his benefit. I think that had a profound effect on him, seeing the thing, but then having that very odd, creepy experience of the driveway and the garage door and the basketball That was a whole nother level of close. And he wasn't good with it. And I don't blame him.
Do you think that if he had kept going with it, that it's possible he would... Do you think this phenomena could make you think as though you've been an experiencer your whole life if you haven't been? Because I feel like maybe you could just through hypnosis. Like if you obsess about this and then you start having dreams about UFOs and then you go, oh, that must be a flashback. And then you go to a hypnotist and then you recover a flashback based on that dream that doesn't exist. I feel like you can create a backstory that way. But I almost wonder if it can't work the other way through the phenomenon itself.
I only had myself to go on, and I had weird experiences before that I didn't know what they were. Like really consistent, weird, repeated over the course of years experiences that I didn't know what they were for years and years until I started hearing other people talk about them, and what they were talking about was the alien thing. I'm like, aliens? No. So I had those before I ever really encountered anything in the awareness of the UFO phenomena interaction with me. That was just weird stuff that happened that I really didn't understand. And then when certain things revealed itself to me along the way, i.e. sightings, Lisa and I up there that night, in proximity to the church, all of that then fell in line with, so the earlier things, that was this too, because it felt the same, seemed to be the same thing. This is what other people are talking about. And so when you do look back over those odd things that you never forgot because they were so palpable memories in your experience that, terrifying, you realize, this same thing happened here and the same thing happened there. And that's associated to the UFO thing. Oh, now I get it. Now, can it make you have memories that you don't have and, work that into your psyche to such a degree that you believe that I guess it could. The way it can play with perception, I'm sure it can do anything. But,
I would just love to know why, for instance, James Carman, who is the director of that movie, The Hidden Hand, he's talked about, he has memories of like being on a military base and doing these remote viewing as a kid, being a part of a child troop of almost like a secret school kind of thing of remote viewing and, I don't know, looking in on aliens and shooting down Russians and killing people and all this sort of stuff. And he was raised on a military base, but he concedes that he has talked to his family about this, and they say none of that ever happened. So is it that he's somehow crazy? Like, he doesn't even know what to make of it. That's what makes his story interesting to me, is like because his family denies anything like that. He wonders where these so-called memories come from. And I don't know, that could be mental illness of some sort. I don't know. It could be he can't differentiate imagination, or...
the question is, was he hypnotized for regression of those events? And if that's the case, then if that's the case, then even fragmented memories that he has of something that he mistakes for this, in other words, was it... I'll put it this way. You could play a board game at the military base and remember that later as, I was being trained in something at a military base, but I don't know what that was, or I was playing some kind of simulation at a military base. And then you get hypnotized and it becomes this expanded story of everything that you're talking about. And something like that, that's just hardening that false memory. So if that's the way it occurred, then I'm not surprised.
Why do you think you never blocked anything out? Or most things out? I don't know if you blocked.
I'm sure I have. There are walks to my bedroom that took an hour and a half that I have no memory of, which coincided with sightings of some very weird stuff.
Yeah, but you're scared out of your mind when this stuff happens, and you don't want it to be real, and yet you don't block it out. Like when I just had that, the experience of being brought somewhere and seeing people on a table and the three beings presenting them and me thinking, why am I seeing this? And female voice says, because you've always wanted to remember an abduction. And then I remember having a longer conversation, but I never jotted it down because I just let it go because I so didn't want it to be real.
Right.
So I don't have that now, but you don't have that problem. And you seem to be more petrified of it, even just in normal waking life, than I am. Like in the situation, I might as well be a Jell-O mold. But in talking about it later, it's like I'm not afraid to take out the garbage. I'm not afraid to be alone in the dark or whatever it is. So it seems like, at least on the surface, you have even more fear than I do, permeating throughout your life. So yes. I'm just wondering, why is it that you don't block that stuff out, even for your own sanity?
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
But it hasn't driven you insane.
No, not yet.
So there's some benefit
not that
to
I'm
it.
Telling you about.
Well, no, but I mean, you do in life, as Dr. Phil might say, what works. You use what works until it doesn't anymore. And it's worked for you to remember these things. Have you ever thought about why that is?
I mean, make no mistake about it. I have gone to a psychologist a couple of times, actually, to talk about this stuff. And I know that one, made this statement. I said, I know you don't believe any of this stuff. And his answer was, well, I didn't say I disbelieve it. I'm not sure what you're experiencing. I'm not sure what it is. He says, I know you're not crazy. I know you're not mentally ill. He said, but I believe there are realms of experience that people can have that they deem to be mystical. And that was the first time I ever heard anybody say anything that mystical experience. I said, how do you put mystical experience and UFO stuff together? I'm like, well, that makes no sense. Now I understand it better. I'm a little more sophisticated in the terminology that people use to describe this stuff. But he made the statement when I would describe events to him. He said that he had spoken to other people with experiences, in the same flavor as my own. He said, but yours seem to be especially visceral and pungent and direct. And I said, yeah, they are. And he said, do you think that's why you experience so much more fear than some of my other people who have talked about this? And I said, yeah, I think it is. I think that I remember more of it is part and parcel to being more afraid of it. You've asked me before, if you've dealt with this your whole life, why are you not less afraid of it? You should be callous to it by now. And my answer is, I don't know how anybody can become callous to that. I honestly don't. I don't think that, and I still don't. I mean, as much as we've talked to our tongues are tired about this stuff. But the loss of control is, to me, is a horrifying prospect. And I know that this is something that you've been able to get over, to let go and let energy do its thing with you. Like, that's fine. I try to meditate. The minute I start to feel like my top of my head is stretching and I'm floating off the couch, I freak out and grab the cushions. I can't meditate. Like, it doesn't work.
This is what's interesting about that is when stuff like that happens to me, I go, okay, what's next? Let's go. And then nothing happens. But in the context of an abduction, I'm just like you. I'm out of my mind with terror. So there's a difference there, to me anyway. Maybe it's because I live with one and then the other one happens infrequently. Whereas you go the other way.
Yeah, it's like, you remember when we did the binaural beats thing? You remember that?
Yeah.
Remember how we both literally heard like there was music coming from a room,
right?
like
across, a child's piano,
and there was like people talking, like there was a crowd having a party in the next room.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but for me to say that's wholly different from an alien experience or a UFO sighting or a ghost sighting or whatever. No, I can't say that. It is, to me, from the same place, in quotes. I'm doing that with my fingers. Like I described to you when I woke up out of a sound sleep, laying on my stomach and felt like I was being pulled backwards. And I kept fighting it, going, no, no, no. But it very clearly felt like I literally closed my eyes and I could see the blackness behind my eyes getting more distant, like like something's pulling me backwards out of me. No, no, no. That's not happening. And I would fight it until I regained myself again. And then I heard music off to my right. And I said, that's interesting. I've never heard that song before. What's that playing on the radio? And meanwhile, it's drawing me backwards. Like it's placating me with music? Really? No. No, it's not happening. Now, were that you, you'd go, okay, let's go. What's next?
Yeah, well, but then I think that is a way to control it, because then it's you going, hey, what's next? And that's probably why nothing happens next.
Maybe. I mean, I don't, but I know that I did at one point go, okay, this time I'm just going to let it go. Because Jeremy says, there's nothing to be afraid of here. You're not dying. You're not going to die.
Jesus, don't pay attention to me. Are you insane?
This
don't
is
put your life in my hands, man. Your very soul.
And I have said this. I said this at that point. I said, there's nothing to be afraid of. This is normal for your body to do this. This is normal. This is okay. And I got myself psyched up enough that I convinced myself this is okay. And so I felt it. It was just as simple as closing my eyes and putting my head down on the pillow. Boom, I'm instantly being pulled backwards. I mean, it was that quick. It was like something was waiting for me to go, okay, you ready? Let's go. And boom, I start getting pulled backwards. And I was good with it until my right ear, after I got so far, I'm like, oh, I'm really back far. And all of a sudden, my right ear went, and I recognize this as, no, it's like the essence of me, whatever that is, whether you want to call it a soul or an astral body or whatever you want to call it, is detaching from my audible, senses. I mean, my senses are disconnecting. Like that's what that is. That's, you're being ripped out. I was like, nope. And I fought like hell to get back. I fought the paralysis of being out. I fought to make my fingers work, and boom, you snap back forward again. And with that, I just rolled over and said, nope, I'm not ready for this. So whatever's doing this, knock it off. I got to go to sleep. And it stopped just that quick. That was it.
See, what if on the other side of that is Space Brothers? Unicorns.
What if on the other side of that is my grandparents? Well, I mean, really, that's a whole nother, like, what if I had snapped out? What would I have seen? Me laying in the bed? Okay, I've heard about that. But is that really what it would have been? And would I have been able to get back in there? I didn't know, seriously, I didn't know what was happening to me. And it's dumb, but the first thing that I always think of when those kind of experiences, and not exactly like that, but I've had other weird things that have happened that are clearly perceptual changes of one kind or another, whether they be out of body type things or things, moving physically in the room, but there's also a component to that, yes, the glass is moving. Yes, I am not touching it. Yes. But there's also something that comes along with that looks like something's warping, like the walls don't look quite right and the curtains are moving. And I touch the curtains and they are indeed moving. It's tactile. I can wait for it to enter my hand. I touch it in my hand. I pull it apart in my hand. Yes, it's there. Something physical is happening, but something perceptual is also going on. And every time that happens, I think to myself, exactly what Terrence McKenna used to say about DMT or other experiences where something very bizarre is going on. He would say, the first thing that's going to come into your mind is, am I dead now? Is that what's happened? And that is indeed what comes into my head. Am I dying? Is that what this is? I'm dying. Or I'm having a stroke. Or any number of, am I having a seizure? Is that what's going on here? I mean, you do ask these questions. They're just never true. It's something else. And so when you begin to question your own mental health because of these things, you go to see a psychologist about that. And you have tests for temporal lobe epilepsy and all matter of other things. And when they don't find anything, then, well, you're back at square one.
You're on your own. Well, you're on your own.
After a lot of needless worry that you're dying or you have a brain tumor or you have epilepsy or something like that. Yeah. You find nothing.
Let me close off with this question, or at least this is my last question. I don't know if you have any. If you could just have this going on in the background and you not be aware of it your whole life, would you? It's kind of the same question you had for the guy. Is the fear worth the opportunity to learn something?
But are you saying if I don't remember it, but I'm still involved in it, would I let it happen?
Yeah, I'm saying there's no scenario. There's no scenario where you're not involved. But if you've got to be involved,
if it was blanked from my memory, would I be okay with that?
Yeah.
It like in totality, like I wouldn't know anything weird was going on, but something weird's going on, but I wouldn't know anything about it.
Right.
Well, if I don't know anything about it, what the hell do I care? You know?
I mean, do you wish that for yourself? How about that?
You mean, do I wish I'd never been involved in this as a whole? Yes.
Well, but it's kind of too late for that.
Do I wish I could be a normal person? Yes. Do I wish I could have normal interests and hobbies? Yes.
Well, are you too interested in it now for, like, if you were to say, look, I don't want this anymore. I want, put it on the back burner forever. Would you really want that?
To walk away from it forever? Yeah. I have had that. Like I said, for a number of years, I had that.
I mean, would you rather have, I guess these are two different questions, because one is like, do you want it to go away now? Which I'm going to guess not, or else we wouldn't be here. You wouldn't do anti-structural experiments and stuff.
I recognize more now than I ever have in my life that I apparently, and I say apparently because I don't want to exacerbate anything that may be being discussed in the next the next room over. But, I realize that I've got a little bit more, it's not control, but I have a certain amount of, I have more permission options than I thought I did. And I know how to use them. I get it a little bit, I get a little bit, not much, but I know enough to know that, when you ask for it, you're going to get it, So it doesn't matter what it is.
I mean, if you're the same person that you are, like you look around the room, not the room you're talking about, but the actual room of like people, and you see that ignorance is bliss actually means what it really means, which is there are a lot of morons, the world's going to pot, and all of that. So if you could be of that, would you want to, or would you still want to know what you know? Is the price worth it?
I wouldn't want to be a slobbering moron. No.
You'd rather be possessed by the devil than be a slobbering moron.
I'll put it to you this way. What you're asking me is the equivalent to me of, if you could choose not to be an artistic person, would you be that? And the answer is no. Because it's all I know. Like, I couldn't be an accountant. Like that's just not going to happen for me.
But could you be somebody who isn't sure that there's more to life than what we see? Would that be appealing to you in any way?
I think that, I think if I'm going to be who I am, I'm going to be a creative type. So, I mean, again, that's what I've done my entire life. I mean, ever since I could hold a pencil in my hand, I've been drawing and all of that. I've been an artist my entire life. And when you're that person, when you're that guy, and other visual artist people will chime in here, I'm sure. When you're that person, you already know there's more than you can possibly know about life and reality and all of that, because you already see it differently. I don't think there's any escaping that being who I am. If I had the choice to eradicate the paranormal from my life, if I could erase it from my life, would I? Yes. Yes. Yeah. I've never wanted this. I've never said, isn't this cool? No. To recognize a bigger reality is one thing. To have it spill into your everyday life is another. And it's caused me and the people that I love a great deal of stress and nonsense over the past 20 plus years, at least. And if I have my choice for that not to be, I would choose for it not to be. Yes. I don't care what there is to learn from that. In that case, I guess, yeah, ignorance would be bliss for me, at least. Yeah.
Okay. So a nuanced question to that, a tangential question.
But that said, it is what it is for me. I can't get it. I can't take it back. So that said, that does conflict, I realize, completely with what I said earlier, which is overall the balance in my life has been positive because of this. So there's your, yin and yang type thing. You don't want it, but you realize that what it's done for you over the course, because it is there, what it's done has been positive. Is that just trying to be a positive outlook guy and say, I've been through so much crap that I can't attach something negative to this because my life will just be crap? No, it's not that. My life is really, richer than the best chocolate cake, by God.
Okay. German chocolate cake, by the way.
Yeah.
So if you have to have this in your life, do you wish that you had never done anything with ufology? Do you wish you had just stayed out of that?
That's a tough call. I mean, I'll put it this way, if I ignored that part of my life, I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have met Lee Townsend. I wouldn't have met a couple other people, that have had an effect on my life, a profound effect on my life. So I can't say that, but could I have done without ufology? Yeah. I wish, I wish that I hadn't had to be confronted with that mess, because it is just an idea machine that somebody left the power on too long, and it's just become this sick, twisted, festering boil of crap. Yes, I wish I hadn't ever heard of ufology, because it's 99.9% utter garbage. I mean, and I'm speaking as somebody who's been around for 30 years in it, Yeah, it's absolute garbage. And that includes some of the best and brightest minds that are on the case. Garbage. So, yeah, I could have done without it. Absolutely. You?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I could have just met you outside of ufology.
That's it.
Because I'm trying to, when I think about what were the benefits of this, and there aren't, are there any? I mean, I don't want to say there aren't any and then be missing something.
Benefits of the experience or benefits of being in this?
No, being in this.
In ufology as a whole, you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I think one thing that I can say about ufology and the people that are in it, in quotes, in it, that includes people that attend conferences and one kind or another, and people that you meet at MUFON meetings and stuff. I met some really intelligent, articulate, smart, critical thinking people at these places. I have. It's not the majority of people, but you and I have even met some people who have been some pretty intelligent, articulate people. Look at our audience that has gravitated towards us, right? They are I can't think of one of them off the top of my head that's yeah, he's a moron or she's an idiot, or no. They're all really critical thinking, smart, intelligent, funny, talented, artistic people.
What about Alligator?
I love Allie.
Oh, okay. Never mind that.
I mean,
shout out to Alligator.
And and she's brilliant, by the way. But
here's a nuanced answer then, because now that you're,
why would you say that about Allie? That's
I don't know,
terrible.
just because it's funny.
Because you rag on her.
Yeah,
Jesus. See, Alice, I just want you to know I stood up for you, babe.
You know why I rag on her? Because she can take it.
Well, she's a very sweet person.
Yes. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, I guess part of the dilemma for me in this is also, it's like the bitter medicine. If I wasn't in this, then I would probably still be a Hopkins Jacobs fan, right? Because I wouldn't know that hypnosis was bad, and I would never have heard of Emma Woods and all of that. Like all those people that I promoted with Culture of Contact, I would have no clue that they were frauds.
Well, if you're not in ufology, you would never heard of them at all. So that's the point.
Well, but I would have seen them on TV. I would have seen them on the History Channel and been like, yeah, he's really looking into this. And then still be scared of hybrids. I'd be like, oh, right. Is that what's happening with me? Hybrids?
Yeah.
So I guess there's that. So it's like for all the crap that you take about that, about seeing facts and knowing the truth, it's worth it because you see facts and know the truth.
I mean, weren't you always skeptical of that anyway?
I was skeptical of their positions, but I didn't know that hypnosis was bad.
Oh, okay. I always looked. I mean, I can't remember what the first thing I ever saw on alien abduction was. It must have been something that's like sightings related or some kind of program like that. And I remember this vividly. I said, bull. These people, this is just the next best thing to shooting a picture of one. Now they've been on it. It's just a one-upmanship over and over and over. I mean, I thought this was absolutely garbage until, I don't know, sometime later, somebody said something that like was very familiar, but very specific and very, very weird. And I'm like, what did she just say? About what? And Lisa said, well, that's what you described to me that time when you were little. I was like, yeah, turn that up. And of course, nothing more really, but that kind of like set me off. And I said, well, that's really too close and too weird and too dumb to be something else. Then what is that then? And that's kind of, almost liftoff point for, you're not only studying these things, you're in it. You're with this. This is attached to you. And that realization is enough to make you go, nope, I'm out. That's it. I'm done. But I didn't, You poke it and then it pokes you back and then it pokes back really hard. And then you have a choice. You can do what I did and go whole hog into it and have your life become a 3-ring circus, or you can walk away and do this smart, responsible thing by your family and leave it alone. There you go.
Well, yeah, I don't have a family, so I'm fine. I'm fine
you
with
do
all
whatever
of that.
you want, right?
But yeah, no, I would not want this phenomenon not in my life because I wouldn't not want to know. I mean, I guess in some sense, that's part of the challenging it and egging it on and tiptoeing toward the terror is wanting to know what that thing is or what is this about,
right?
Provided that I don't die and end up in the stomach of a demon, then I take it back. If that's the end result of this, that they're just fattening me up for the big eat. Then no.
Yeah. Yeah, I never thought of that. Yeah.
Fattening me up with fear so they can devour my soul at death. Yeah, that's not what I want. Yeah. But barring that, I'm fine with it.
I just don't want to, I don't want to take my last breath and as soon as my eyes close, my eyes open again and they're really big and an alien leans over top of me and says, so how was it? I don't want that, and to see my reflection in his eyes that I look exactly like him, all spindly, and how was it? I don't want that to be it.
Aha.
But I gotta say, it's like when you look at this thing and you start hearing people say, well, this is all a simulation. This is all, well, I'll put it this way. If this is a simulation, like they talk about that whole holographic thing and, This could be a computer program that we're all taking part in, and we don't know who's real and who isn't and all that. Well, if it's a simulation, that means there are simulators. And I don't really think I want to meet the simulators. But I have a feeling if it's a simulation, we are going to meet them if we haven't already.
But you would only be thinking that because you think you're real right now.
Exactly.
But once you woke up and you were like, and that guy was like, "Hey, how was it?" You'd probably be like, "Really cool, man. You should try it."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like, either that or you don't wake up at all, that when you go, everything goes matrixy and you become a piece of code. Well, you weren't one of the real people. Sorry. Back to the source with you. I mean, that could be a little bit of a downer.
You're really just the code in the head of Jim Peniston.
Right. Yes.
The end.
Yeah. I'm binary code.
That's our time, everybody.
Yep. I've been locked up in a notebook for 50 years, right? Jesus. Yeah. I mean, that, it's like, and any of that, I mean, you ponder that kind of crap and, you think to yourself, well, I wasn't involved in the paranormal. I wouldn't think that, but I don't know that. I mean, you say you wouldn't not want to know these certain things. See, I believe that if I hadn't been somehow hooked by ufology and realized that this is what these weird experiences are, I think I would have gone the opposite route, or maybe into a more heady route of saying, when a 5-year-old like I was says to their mother, when we're not down Nana's house, because my Nana, my grandmom, she lived about 6 houses down the street from us. She lived on the opposite corner from us. And I couldn't see her house. And I remember this vividly, and my mom surprisingly does too. We went to walk down to my Nana's house, and I said to my mom, when we're not there at Nana's house, is she there? She goes, what do you mean? Is she home all the time? I don't think so. I said, no. Is her house and her, are they real? Are they really there? Like when we're not down the street? That's a very esoteric question for a 5-year-old to ask. And what I'm essentially asking is, if we can't perceive Nana, is she real? And that's what I meant. I wonder if I wouldn't have gone down a more, I guess, is that a philosophical question, I guess?
Well, that's true, because you and I both had the same question growing up. What is the stuff between things? Right. Yes. And I think it would have gone further that direction. And I still don't know the answer. Yeah. Like I was pondering it the other day, the same question I've pondered since I was a little kid. If you break a stick in half, where does the piece go that was just broken that glued it together? Right. Yes. How does it break? These are really, I mean, to people at large, these are dumb questions. Well, why would you even ask that question? That's just dumb. No, it's not dumb. I'm not downstairs right now. My wife and my dogs are downstairs. Are they there? Well, if I go down, they're there, but are they there right now if I can't see them? If you split an atom, you get a nuclear blast, right? Right. So if you split a stick, are you risking splitting an atom? Is that perhaps why the stick cracks? I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. Why should a stick crack when you break it? Why should it crack? It cracks because it's a mini detonation. No. Yeah. See, these are the questions that I asked in the midst of the 5 to 9 year old black sheets, light in the middle of the night, can't move. These are the questions I was asking. And so was it that had the effect to make me ask those questions, or would I have asked those questions anyway? I don't know. Well, perhaps we'll continue this. This has been a long episode. Yeah, well, hey, you all got your money's worth. For sure. And let me just remind you, if, as you're hearing us talk about Jeff covered with a sheet, 3 seals in a dream, all these things. And if you're wondering, what are they talking about? Go purchase the Paratopia archive, because we're riffing off of concepts and experiences that our listeners of the first incarnation of Paratopia are completely familiar with. So we don't want to bore everyone with retreads.
Yeah, I think from episode 2, right? I mean, or 3. I think it's episode 2 or 3 of Paratopias where we go over each other's stuff.
Yeah, and also the culture of contact. I have my interview with Jeff in the bonus material, Culture of Contact, and you get a whole lot of his backstory in there. So.
Yeah. Prepare to not believe.
Not believe again for the first time.
Not believe again, that's right. I believe me, I don't believe it either, but it's my goddamn life, so what do you want me to do?
I lived it. All right, well, until next episode, everybody.
Yes, thank you all for listening. It's been a long one. So
yeah, and you
enjoyed it.
The Jeff here just recorded an episode of someone else's show, of Project Archivist, and so you've been a good sport here tonight, Jeff.
My throat is weary.
Right. Good night.
Good night.